Hello and welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. My name is Nuala and
My name is Matt.
together we are...
He's a priestess. Why is it always weird?
It's a silly thing. Anyway, today we're going to dive into this idea of ritual and ceremony. So I may have touched on it a little bit before, but in this walk and this time of my life specifically, I'm really guided and being driven to really connect to the ceremonious aspect of celebration. So consciously celebrating events, consciously celebrating moments in time, and in a lot of these spaces in time, I am hosting that ritual. Now, I just quickly looked at what ritual specifically stands for, and essentially it is a set of actions, words, or practices completed within like a religious, like bound by religious trait. So I guess connecting to that spiritual form. And I feel like for me personally, these sorts of rituals ought to be more in the forefront of our character building process of journeying through life. Now, initially for me, ritual came about mainly because I felt like we weren't paying enough attention to the depth or this moment in time. We weren't celebrating this moment in time in a way that was conscious. So now I'm working with like many people in my community where we are consciously creating celebratory actions or practices, and we're trying to weave those in to our everyday. Now, as I mentioned last week, I talked about like that ritualizing my facial connecting to face, connecting to self as I prepare to face the day. And that's just kind of like that side note of the ritual and like really connecting to self. So being really conscious about the things that we're doing. I'm also bringing in a lot of ritual in terms of recently I celebrated my daughter's 5th birthday. And as part of her birthday, I said to her, would you like to have a little bit of a circle, a women's circle with some of your girlfriends, and we can sit around and we'll bathe you in flowers and sing to you and hold you. And she was like, yeah, like I want to do that. And I feel like for me, this feels really important for her to grow up in a space and a place that these things are really normal. And she's been sat in circle. I ran for a year a moon circle when she was quite little, and for little kids. So I run it for the mums still, but or with a collaborative co-op kind of thing. But with the kids, I only did it for a year, and it was all a bit too much for me because I was like, come on, listen. They weren't quite there, but it was also really beautiful, and they really connected to the moon, and they started to understand the seasons and that flow. And I think specifically for little girls, but also for little boys, to really just connect to that seasonal happening that's happening around us. It feels really important for me, especially with bigger events, but even understanding the flow of the moon, how it impacts all of us, and just stripping back the neon lights a little bit and reconnecting to the consciousness of self. That to me is what I wanted to kind of bring up and share and bring to the forefront of people's minds as a parent, that these things are available to you, and that whether or not they are being done and practiced prior, I don't have anyone in my family or connected to anyone that I know of personally that is doing the things that me and a few of my friends are really like consciously harboring and making sure that they are practices. I know that outside of this little hub that I live in, absolutely it is being done. But yeah, it is such a reminder for me that we can consciously celebrate really monumental events in a way that is not just doing it to do it.
It really shows you how far we've come from nature. And like around the times the Bible was written, for example, we were in a more of a magical, mythical state of consciousness as a species. So we saw things that we couldn't explain. Things probably, well, this is probably not 2,000 years ago, but maybe even further back, where we couldn't explain lightning or thunder or the seasons maybe. So we had to come up with a way of storytelling to explain these things. So that's the magical, mythical level of consciousness. Today, we interpret everything literally, which hasn't worked out that well.
No.
And it's arguably getting worse. But coming back to what you're saying, part of the reason it's getting worse is because we're not celebrating those rituals. So a lot of those full moon rituals, for example, we don't celebrate that because we're too busy in the grind, in the hustle. And people, a lot of the times, people either practicing those rituals, they're put down by people in their circle. So they have to find their own tribe to do that with. What you'll see a lot of is people will have to put on a different mask for that group of friends, go to another group of friends, wear a different mask, spend time with their family, different mask, spend time with someone else, it's a different mask, go to work as a different mask, and then they just end up tired. So then they don't even have the capacity for the ritual anymore.
Yeah, and it's such a I think this is where I really like am landing more and more into my authentic self and just being who I am wherever I am. And it has been, yeah, it's a bit of a like, I'm sure people are like, fuck, this chick, like, what's she even talking about? And there's moments where I'll dumb down, and I've definitely got a friend who he'll pick me up on it when I play off things as a joke, or I'm like, oh yeah, I just know the universe is working in my favor, and I'll smile. And he's like, well, is it? And I'm like, well, it is, absolutely. But he kind of makes sure that I'm like, no, don't dumb it down. And I think I'm getting more and more capable of not dumbing any of it down, being able to share it in a way that's palatable. Whereas before I would share things in ways that, lacked
It's like you're
consumption.
talking a different
Absolutely.
language, yeah.
And I think when I even share, but this is the thing, a lot of women specifically, when I share that, I've had blessings with all three of my children, and a blessing being a mother blessing, like that has its roots in traditional, like a particular mother blessing has its roots in South American culture. And there is mother blessing throughout all culture and tradition. It's difficult as a white woman to actually find my, say, Celtic roots and really dive deep into the traditions. They exist. They are practiced seldomly because essentially a lot of those women were killed and burned on the stake as witches.
We would have been burnt for sure in a past life.
Oh yeah, we would definitely not have been us. But yeah, it's been it's sort of a remembering, and a remembering of who we really are and what we are all about
and where we've come from.
Totally. And I think so now, as a kind of if I were an Indigenous white person, wherever that land would have led me, obviously not here, but there would have been Indigenous rites of passage and ceremony and ritual that would have been flooding and filled through the tribe and filtered through everyone. That would have been often, weekly. What we have today is church on Sunday, and that would be probably most people's ritual or practice that is ritualized.
In theory, it would be. I'm not disagreeing. I would just add that most people would believe on some level that they would be an asshole during the week, go to church to get forgiven, then just continue being an asshole again. And that's their kind of chasing their tail ritual.
And I would say that's the very similar thing for people that catch up with their friends, right? They're like assholes through the week to work mates or whatever, and then they go out and hang out with their friends on the weekend. They're all nice. So it's all a matter of consciousness. And I think that when we start to really practice and we embody the ritual, we start to really embody. And for me personally, I can feel this spiritual awakening, this real deep knowing and deep connection that's happening, that is opening something so deep and so real and alive inside of me that's always and often there. So like I was going to go on to is when I share with women that I have a blessing and we sit in circle and we share beautiful words for whoever is creating life, and we honor them, and we, see them for who they are, as this, like, the mother of all mothers, the creator of heaven on earth. And it's like the women, like even people that find ritual or anything that I talk about quite esoteric and out there, they're like, wow, that sounds so beautiful. Like, it really, like, imagine that was how we, did all ceremony, instead of having a baby shower where it's all about,
Tupperware.
well, not quite, but like, essentially just throwing a really beautiful party where you have everything curated, everything like really neat and tidy and clean, and, you have beautiful cakes. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a lack of consciousness and lack of depth to actually really honoring someone and celebrating them in that moment during this rite of passage. And that is where I really want to get clear on as a the species, that like where I think we need to start going. And for me, even when it comes to conscious conception and the ritual, I don't know, right there, the ritual practices of like bringing that together and just kind of going, okay, yeah, we love each other, like we've spoken about. We love each other so much that we are ready to spread this love further. And like, it would be so beautiful if that was like a conscious thing, and we sought out these people, like someone like myself that would take you through a ceremony that holds you in that space and says, here you are, let's hold you here, let's, like, it's sort of like marriage, it's like that marriage of two people to create life. Instead, marriage is a big $50,000 wedding, and it's hard not to do that, because honestly, there's so much beauty in the wedding. I think I'm all for the party and the wedding and that celebration of love, but we lack the consciousness and the depth.
Yeah, because we corporatize and commercialize everything. It's all about, you buy flowers for someone. On a given day, it's $50. As soon as you put wedding, it's $500.
Yeah.
And it's really bastardized a lot of the rituals that we have today.
Yeah.
And even for some of them, it's just, they've all disappeared.
Yeah.
Really.
And it makes sense that it has, because it is too expensive. It takes too much from you energetically.
Now it becomes a hassle.
Yeah.
Or it's got to be a huge thing. And if it's a huge thing that's 2 years away, then you've got to save your money for that one particular day.
Yeah. And I want to just give people a bit of an indicator of what they can do. If you do have small children, even just by bringing together a small group of friends that just can, once a month we catch up and we sit around the new moon, like we sit in the dark moon before the new moon, if that's the time, or the full moon. And really beautifully, this lady that I met at a camp out, she's actually got her very own red tent. And for this year, there's 10, I think that she has 10 women, or even a few more, maybe 14 women. And every month at the full moon for 3 days, no matter when it lands, for 3 days, these women come together and they sit in ceremony in the red tent. And she is taking this actually to the next level. Like, she is ready to, she's like, we're not just going on ritual conscious retreats anymore. We're making this life being. And I mean, I spoke to my partner about it, and he was like, yeah, okay, but who would go? He's like, I would step up for you. Like, 3 days a month. I wouldn't be able to work those 3 days. I'd have the kids and you'd probably take the baby, but it would be like, he's like, we could try and make it work, but society doesn't allow you to have those, to make those work. So, even simply a few days ago, I was with a few friends, and we sort of collaborated together and hosted this closing ceremony, the closing of the portal from birth for a friend of ours. And, sitting in circle and singing and sharing really beautiful words and holding space for this mother to really share what she needed to share about her birth and her rite of passage into mothering. And then also holding her and closing off her body and nourishing that, and like, you know, everyone holding her with really loving hands. And it's just it's so simple and so powerful. And what I feel we're doing, this like grassroots vibration that we're creating is to ensure that, you know, having 3 daughters for myself now is like, it is important for me that they actually understand the power of this. And, you know, even with my 5-year-old, like how she felt when we all sat there and sang to her and like covered her in flowers, like I could see just like this overwhelming feeling of joy, slightly overwhelming for her too, like to actually receive that. But I think as time goes on, if we keep doing that, which I'm sure we will, to just keep reiterating that this is the path that we're walking, and this is you will be honored on these special days. And when it comes to Christmas, like we've created a bit of a ritual where we, you know, we sit
Do you
in
celebrate
circle.
that on 24th or 25th?
We celebrate on the 25th or whatever. Actually, it depends what day. It's not a specific day for my family.
Yeah, for a week.
Or whatever. But even that, like I've kind of started to ritualize that, where one of my brothers and my partner and my mum, and we will sit in circle. Actually, my second brother joined in last year, where we sat in circle and we shared for each person like what we saw as their greatest growth, and how they, you know, what we're proud of for them this year. And, you know, just even having those moments to share those words. Like we've done this now maybe for 3 or 4 years, and it's awkward initially, but it's like leaning into that, and all of us feel so full after sharing those words with each other. And then I obviously make it a bit fun, and we sing a song, and you've got to write your own lyrics, and that's kind of how we finished off. And it's it's really fun, but it's also just it is a bit of fun, but it's also creating a bit of ritual around that as well. So whatever happens after that, I don't really mind. Like Christmas is like, you know,
well, Christmas is
whatever
it's the biggest event in the Christian calendar for sure.
Yeah.
Very few people know what Christmas is. We've been told the Hallmark version of what it is, but no one really knows what Christmas is.
You want to share that for us, Matt?
Well, I won't go too deep, but originally Christmas was on 21st.
Yeah.
Because it coincided with the solstice.
Yes.
With the winter solstice. It was the Northern Hemisphere thing.
Yeah.
But then that came from allegedly Jesus's conception, which was the high tide for the spring equinox.
Oh, the spring equinox.
Go backwards. And then they just added 9 months to that. That's why we have Christmas today.
Oh, yeah, because that's when he would have been.
Then a couple of hundred years ago, the Roman Catholic Church changed it to the 25th. So it's actually a pagan tradition.
Yeah.
That the Christians thought, we'll make some money off that. Sweet.
Or also for themselves, it's like maybe that landed on a Saturday. Or like whatever. It was it was the Sunday. It was the Sabbath. So they were like, okay, well, we can't do that on that day. We'll have to do it the week after to celebrate at that time. And then it just stuck the year after. It was the Sunday, or a Saturday, Sunday. You know what I mean? I don't know that they were as callous as you're making out.
Worse than me.
Stole it. But I think that's really important to remember too. We are in the Southern Hemisphere. So for us, it's like celebrating midsummer at Christmas time.
Even Easter. Easter's a different date every year.
Oh, yeah. Well,
So that's when he supposedly died.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that people don't know why we're celebrating.
Yes. Oh, but this is it, right? This is, I mean, and like I said a few weeks ago, the stuff we're sharing today is probably not for the person who is just completely unconscious, but it's a bit of a wake up, like a reminder. What are you doing and why are you doing that? And then also I want to take it one step further and say that lean in more, be more conscious. Let's take it to that level where our children now, we are changing, being the change, so our children can filter through that change. Because unless we are the change, the children don't just wake up one morning and be the change. It's because of the underground current that changes around them.
And hopefully they can make it better in their own way.
Totally. And then they just like take it and run. But it is very much, from my perspective, like we should be celebrating the midwinter, or like I can't think of the words. There's like particular pagan words, but it's like in the Southern Hemisphere, we should be focused on, like, you know, our Christmas should be at like the 21st of June or the 22nd of June. I think it's around that time. Yes. Well, that is when you celebrate Midsummer in Sweden.
Right.
So that would be midwinter here, which would be our Christmas, essentially. And then right now, a friend and I, Haley and I, are doing, like, we celebrate the season. So the seasonal shift, the transitional season, and being like the transition of the season, or being in the season, and really like harboring and honoring that time as like a kind of festival, or like kind of really making it really intimate, but like an intimate festival for the women in our life, to like really reconnect to your own season and to your intention of that season, and your focus and your body embodying that rhythm. And I guess that's what I feel is what I really wanted to kind of base this on, is just those rhythms that are conscious rhythms that we're celebrating. And I think the more that we can do this in the smallest of ways, and whether that is just, you know, the morning of your child's birthday, or the morning of your partner's birthday, that you sit together in consciousness of like, what was this last year? So this is the first year that I have done this, but with my 5-year-old, we did a yearly interview, and essentially asked her all of these questions, like, what was your favorite moment? What lit you up the most in this last year? And or like, what do you feel is your favorite color, or anything like that? But just kind of spending that time to really get to know who she feels she is in this moment, and then celebrating that. And so, yes, we had cake and candles, and that feels like everyone's doing cake and candles. Like, let's just take that little step further, where we can get a little bit more conscious about what it is. You know, I measured her and I weighed her.
Yeah, it's not just getting together and having food and friends over. It's let's make it personal as well. How much have you grown physically? And like literally a different person every year. Yeah. Every cell, And that was it, right? Wasn't it? It was exactly 365 days or something thereabouts. That is your personal New Year, right? And I think, like, when we think of it like that, it feels so important to celebrate. And that, not only that, like, obviously I'm very much in this time of growing babies and birthing and all those things, but like the ceremony that is available for that actually calls in community, that works as that magnet and magnetizes people into this space. And from where I was 5 years ago with my first daughter, you know, I had a home birth and had a blessing, and I don't think many people around me had ever, or at least the people that I was around, had even heard of these things. And I was like, oh yeah, like this is really important to me. Now I've kind of cultivated a group of women that are so into that, and then obviously their families as well. It's like everyone, we're starting, like the rumble is there, the interest is there. And I think it'll grow more and more. And it is, like, you know, not out of this area. It is there, and it is happening more and more. But that's the hard thing. We don't have the elders to lean on. And there's serious deficiency of wise elders in our culture. Yeah. Big time.
And what ends up happening is that we, you know, people like myself who are, you know, I'm in the season of mothering, are ending up stepping up into that space, probably a little bit immaturely, to just do the best that I can in that space, because I know it's needed and wanted, or at least I want it. So it's needed. And, but yeah, it's like, it's difficult to find the elder. And then the place that you would lean to is the Indigenous culture. And there are elders here in Australia. Aboriginal elders are available and here, and they are willing and wanting to share their practices. And for example, myself, Min Mia, an Aboriginal elder who is sharing her cultural women's work. She's obviously teaching that to people to pass on all of these traditions. So I actually had a traditional placental burial ceremony for Aqua, and it was really profound and special, and, you know, all of these pieces, and like really connecting to connecting to the spiritual realm through those practices, because that's what they are. They're still connected to earth. Earth spirit is one, and we are still part of the whole. So I guess that sort of, from the women's perspective, I feel like there is a rumble there. There's a vibration there, and the men's is sort of there. Like, are you seeing that?
It is there, as you say, but whether that's adopted is a different story for several reasons. One,
so we're talking about the rites of passage for men.
Well, if we're talking about rites of passage, so the rite of passage, obviously, a boy becoming man. So
is that the only one?
Well, there's lots out there. It depends on your culture, depends where you are, your family unit, tribe, etc. But generally in the West, there is no rite of passage.
Getting your peas.
Peas, yeah, that would be a rite of passage, for sure, in a way. In our culture, there's a lot of young men. The whole rite of passage thing is innately within us. So we get a huge boost of testosterone in puberty. We don't know what to do with that.
Absolutely not.
That's another episode.
So you don't know what to do with it?
So we don't know what to do with it. So if we express it, it's either going to be a fight.
Yeah.
It's going to be some kind of reckless skill, dangerous driving or whatever, drug use. That's why a lot of young men play sport. It's really an outlet for that. But that's it. That's all we've really got. There's no elders saying, well, this is the phases you're going to go through. So I like Arthur Young's model of conscious evolution, where the first is you're born from essentially no thing into something. So you've lost that freedom of consciousness.
Yeah.
Then you go through this phase from the loss of freedom, which kind of loosely correlates to the chakras. Then you go into a binding phase where you become everyone else's opinion, because your family, your friends, very few thoughts are your own. So then the first rite of passage for me is where you start to differentiate someone else's thoughts to your own, which is what he calls the centering stage. That centering stage, you start realizing the self, who the person is in the mirror. And then you enter into like a warrior phase. This is where you start to differentiate what's worth fighting for, because you're forming your own thoughts, your own ideologies, your own beliefs, and they're kind of shaping your character as you. And that's how you relate to the outside world.
Yeah. Do you like to give it an age? Because I feel like before you turn to the warrior, like it's under 7, you become the warrior after 7. Or would you say the warrior is a little bit later than that?
I would say, well,
7 to 10.
We
like
would
that 7 to 10.
we would paint the warrior anywhere from 14 to 21.
Okay, right.
I would say.
Yeah.
Because by 21, you've finished school. You're supposed to be in university or finish. You finish university. That's 4 years.
I was finished at 21, turning 22.
Yeah. And if you've gone through that process, then you're supposed to know what you're doing. And if you correlate that to the third chakra or yellow ray energy. It's all about who am I? What is my purpose? What's my role in this tribe, in this world? And if you don't know that, by that age, it really starts to stress you out because it's wired into us. We don't get grandfathered or coached or mentored, better word. We don't get mentored through that. So that's why a lot of people just go traveling. So I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I hated school. My idea, what I thought an adult was, because I saw two parents working all day, every day, trying to look after five of us. And they just came home tired and miserable. And I thought that's what adulting is. So I didn't have anything to compare it to. And Dad was drilling it into me. You got to, study really hard, get the grades to go to uni, 4 more years of school. Awesome. Get a good job to pay your way in the world. That's what I thought life was. I'm like, fuck that. But luckily I met people along the way who showed me I could do it differently. But I had to go through a few catalytic events to find that. And that's what the rite of passage is really all about. You come up against an ordeal and you, in your own way, figure your way through it. So that's one rite of passage.
The journey, right?
The hero's journey. That's what that is. And they continue to go. They don't go anywhere, but that's what life is. But this one that you go through today conditions you for the one coming up.
Yeah.
So it gives you all the tools for the next one. But we don't recognize that as it is. We recognize that as, life's just doing me. The universe hates me. I'm the victim. I'm going to be in this self-wallowing pit and just hope it goes away.
Or more commonly, I would say, cover that self-wallowing up with a drug habit.
Something. Yeah.
And a going.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's...
Or just like, okay, follow whatever they said to do and just do it for as long as it feels okay.
So that takes you back into the binding phase where you essentially sheep herd mentality. You just follow the crowd and do whatever someone tells you to do. Because in the centering stage, you've got your own thoughts and ideologies where you can think for yourself and you don't necessarily go with what the crowd's doing because it doesn't feel right. But then you get to a choice point, and this is where you can say, okay, I'm at the fork of the road. I can keep doing what I've always been doing. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. Or I can go this way, which is sort of unknown, but it's my way. So I get to learn that as I go. And this way I need to own my shit. I need to take responsibility for me, people, not necessarily people around me, but I need to take responsibility for my relationship with the people around me because I'm 50% of that relationship.
Yeah.
This is where I need to say what I mean and mean what I say because that's the definition of an adult.
So we're through the warrior into the adult? Is that where we're talking?
This would be...
Or we're past the adult and we're past what comes after the warrior then?
This would be... Paul Chet would call it the king-queen phase.
Oh, okay, right.
This is where you...
Hang on, where do we go from warrior? Because you just spoke about...
From warrior.
From warrior to the king-queen.
King-queen. So this is where you have your empire, right? You pay your own bills. Maybe you've got a company. Maybe you have employees. Maybe you don't. But you're owning your existence. You're paying your own way. You're on your own steam doing that. The problem with that is life can get quite complicated. So all these little challenges of life. Just think about your life right now. And how many things could be really complicated if you weren't who you were.
Oh, yeah.
If you went left instead of right, as an example. Like shit could get weird quick.
Yeah.
So that's the little almost booby traps put there for you to go back into your conscious evolution. So you can go back into the biding phase really quick. But through that complexity, you reach the height of complexity. That's where you hit that, I could do this a lot easier. I don't need the fancy shit. I don't need the shiny things. I don't need all the money I'm told I need. I can simplify this. That is the birth of the wise elder. Because then you start recognizing life's really complicated enough. I don't need to add to it. However, I can simplify myself. I can simplify life. I don't need the fancy things as long as I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually satiated, what else do I really need? And then all the shit that comes at you, instead of barking back like you would have as a teenager full of testosterone, you can say, oh, I used to be like that. So you can see it for what it really is.
Yeah.
So that's another rite of passage.
Yeah, so that is, I guess what you've just described is the journey of the rites of passage. Now, how do we, like I asked before, you said that it's sort of not adopted, the rites of passage, but is there anything available in our society that you found or know of or have connected to?
Well, it's finding people who you resonate with. They're usually older because they've lived more. They're just people that you can listen to someone on YouTube, for example, and they'll just say something that resonates. And that can just be one of your teachers.
Yeah, okay. So for you, you would say that moving through these rites of passage doesn't need to necessarily have a ritual or ceremony to it. It's more about...
It's an internal thing.
Right.
It's an internal shift.
Yeah.
You
so
wake
the
up.
internal shift's happening.
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing. Personally, I know like the internal shifts are happening every so often. They become bigger and louder, whether that's your birthday or whether that's giving birth or pregnancy or something like that, for me personally, or how I can correlate it to. But I'm thinking about for men, like, do you feel like in our way for those rites of passage, and I think everyone really should have a mentor or mentee or have someone that is have that relationship, mentor, mentee, but then have someone to look up to, someone to has walked the walk that you're wanting to walk. But like, how would we celebrate that, or how could you imagine that being celebrated? That transition, say from warrior to adult, or from into warrior, like that 14-year-old that's just got that huge injection of testosterone. We just mentioned you mentioned earlier that that there is like...
I know how the 13-year-old wants to say.
is injecting their energy. But how, like, I know we talked about previously about that potentially the rites of passage that would have occurred at that moment in time for young boys to men or that boys to warrior would have been something that today would be very much so like...
Well, back in the day, as an example, in a tribal unit, you would have got beaten to the edge of your life. And if you survived that, they would have called you a man. Because in that tribe, they have no room for weakness.
So survival of the fittest at the absolute nth degree.
That would be an extreme example. Yeah. I'm sure it goes on today. Probably not where we live.
Definitely not in the show.
No. But then I think it's got to be defined as well. Because then a lot of young men don't really see it happening. They might feel it happening, but you're right, it's not celebrated, and it's almost not caught by the parents. They might say it to each other, like the mum, dad, oh, so-and-so's just...
Spends a lot of time in his room.
The showers are long. So he's essentially becoming his own man. And that ideally in that situation, I guess it doesn't have to be this way, but that's when the dad would pull the son aside and have that chat of the changes that he's going through and just marking that and just sharing words with the child who's becoming a man.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be necessarily about the birds and the bees, but it's just going to, this is what's happening. Do you want to talk about it?
Or what are you feeling too? Like, what's the feeling in that? Because I guess that's the thing, that's that whole idea of like, we do really need boys' spaces that you can see the men in front of you. Like you can see all of those things happening. Like I personally have the idea, like when my daughters receive their period, like that's it's pretty bang on. They're going to go, one day they're not going to have a bleed, and then the next day they'll have a bleed, and that'll happen. And So it's like obviously there's going to be a lead up and a build into the puberty actually occurring and overflowing. However, I personally really see how much like I will be harmonizing, ritualizing that and bringing together my younger daughters with my oldest daughter so that they can see how that process occurs, just the way that my daughters have watched each other's births. Or not each other's, but they've seen birth now and they understand that. And even like through our friends, we've watched each other's births and our children have watched each other's births. So it's like we have those, creating that print inside of their mind or understanding of what's happening. So it's almost like, because we don't have the grandfathers that are actually holding. I think that's one thing personally and what I see in society at large now is that the grandfather doesn't hold the men's spaces. The father struggles, like our parents would struggle to hold the mothering and the fathering spaces.
Well, the grandfather's had enough. The dad just wants 5 minutes to himself.
Yeah. And so then it's up to the parents to actually start to infiltrate or start to adjust these things now so that at least the children that are youngest get the most like depth of experience so that they're actually seeing their older brother being in men's spaces with groups of men and adults. And I don't know, I guess that's how I see it, because I can see that with my daughters at least. Like, and I obviously have girls, so for me it feels very much like those pieces and that rite of passage as they go through puberty feels very like obvious. And I'm hopeful that in any of the older girls in my group or in the group as I grow and get older, like my daughter's only 5, so I don't imagine we've got 5 more years of traversing, 5 to 7 years probably, or say whatever, 5 to 9 years before she'll actually get her bleed. So I'm hopeful that that she will get to watch that rite of passage in front of her, and then we continue that flow, and that she gets to watch and experience like understanding that. So it's not just the dad sits down one day and says the thing. It's actually in culture or in the community that this is something that happens, and it happens to everyone. And I mean, me and my friends especially, we all talk very openly with our children about all the things so that they understand that things are changing and that these changes are really normal, and we want to celebrate that, and we want to celebrate you. And I know that there's a lot of things online today that that give you an opportunity to kind of reconnect to that moment in time when you first got your period, because there's a lot of things about your own personal walk through birth and through those early years and whatever happened, like the trauma that it exists there, with the shame that has maintained in your body viscerally, and then what you step forth with. So a lot of there's a few schools of thought that say, how you experience your first period can be how you will experience how you think about birth. So if it was shamed or shunned or whatever, it can be common that you then feel shame in stepping up and sharing, or, how did you feel about that experience? Was it a hard experience? How did you feel about it? Because it could have been a hard experience, but you didn't think it was. So it didn't actually etch something
so someone
negative.
made it like a...
Potentially. Or if you actually felt like that when someone said nothing. Like, so for me personally, I remember I'd spoken about periods prior to getting my period, because a lot of my closer friends had it before I had received it. So then when my period came, I was like, I called my friend. I'm like, hey, I just got home and I've got my period. And she was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what do I do? She's like, well, you don't need to do anything. Like, do you have a pad? And I'm like, yeah, I think I know where they are. And then that night my mum came home and I shared that with her, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah. And it was nothing really more to it than that. It was more about, okay, so these are your options in terms of like collecting the bleed, whether you want to use a tampon or whether you want to use a pad. But it didn't feel, there was nothing to it that felt... one thing, a good friend...
Did you feel like it was sort of brushed under the carpet?
Not, I mean, sort of, but not really. Like, it didn't feel brushed away, didn't feel hidden. I definitely talked about it. I remember going to school the next day and being... And then I remember my best friend at the time, she was like, oh, I remember when I got my period, my hips grew and like my boobs grew. And I was like, fuck yeah, like here I come. And then like 20 years later, nothing happened. Damn you, Becky. But yeah, no, it was like, I just remember, you know, because she obviously went through those huge changes for her, like as that, like womanhood occurred and transitioned. And, but yeah, so for me personally, I didn't have any shame. There was nothing, it wasn't really spoken about, but there was nothing negative. I didn't feel any negativity around that process. However, imagine I had, you know, not had the confidence to speak about it to all the people around me.
There'd be a fair few out there that wouldn't have the confidence. Yeah,
Absolutely. Especially if you got your period in primary school when like there's still, you know, it's like, ew, boys, or like, I mean, not that it wasn't this, like, I think in high school we had quite a nice group of friends, but it's like, that I think that idea of having that ritual and like really being conscious about it, and I'm not really sure. I just know how I'm doing it now and how important these things are for me. But I'd love to know whether these men's spaces exist. And if you're listening to this and you know that they are around, we'd love to hear from you and kind of share these spaces.
I know like a group of small groups of men,
people.
however that was going to come out, that do their own thing, whether it's just like a bushwalk or an ice bath or even just, I know two guys that it's either the first or the last Friday of every month, they, regardless of what's going on in their life, they'll get together and go to a pub and just talk over a few drinks. Yeah. That's their therapy.
That's it, yeah.
And that's just holding space for that. But I think with the young boys going into men, it's really when they coming into it their own, when they feel they don't need mummy, daddy anymore. And that can happen at 16, and that can also never really happen.
So even with the injection of the testosterone, it might not.
They'll go through all the
physical changes,
the emotions that young men feel, all the same urges, all of that. But men, like psychologically, they're still a child and they'll never grow up.
Do you think that's because they didn't get to experience the rite of passage?
Could be, yeah, absolutely. They would have had a choice at one point or maybe several points, but they've taken the easy way every time. So that would have come back to some kind of parental conditioning on some level. So a lot of men out there playing victim, sabotaging, selling themselves for, you know, material stuff. Sometimes the way you're thinking, but they're the people that just don't grow up.
Yeah.
And it's more men than women. They just don't take responsibility. They are literally the eternal child archetype.
And do you think that they can, so what would you say would be a option for a rite of passage if we were to ceremoniously create a ritual for these young boys to actually psychologically support them in the like...
Stone them, yep. Oh, no, that's not what you're doing?
Oh, no, like injection of testosterone.
Well, fighting, okay.
Well, I mean, maybe it is a fight or whatever that might be. Like, how would that...
I think for a lot of the time for a male... It can be trickier because we don't have something that's obvious apart from hair in special places.
Face.
Yeah, face. So for us, it's not really defined.
I feel like that's the thing, right? That's why you need to be from young boys need to be collectively connected to older boys and adult men so that they can like kind of walk this walk continuously. And I guess, you know, my partner used to be part of a group that they would go and do the bushwalk ice baths thing, but they, it's easy to just like put it on the back burner and not actually prioritize it.
Yeah.
And that feels like, it's such an essential thing. I mean, this is outside of the ritual and rites of passage aspect, but coming back to that in a sense of like getting like, creating men's spaces where men walk together and like can hold space with each other. And even like, for example, my partner who's only got daughters, like for him to be part of that group, to be like part of that community. And I think that there is, I feel like for me personally, like in my community, especially like as women, we're like the ground roots or the grassroots of like women's spaces, and ritual is like, it's humming, it's there, the vibration's happening, it's happening. And whereas for the guys, it's sort of less, it's almost because there's a bit of a lack of appeal to the spiritual psychological aspect of it.
Of course there is, because we're too busy trying to protect. That's what we're told. We have to be the protector and provider for everything and everyone. And modern interpretation of that is financial. So that's why we work 70 hours a day to get all that and beat ourselves to the ground, because that's what we think, that's what we're told we need to be doing as men.
That's how we are the protector.
Yeah.
Oh, not
so that's
me.
how we translate that.
Yeah.
Not that, oh, maybe you just need me to hold space for you today. That's how I can protect you.
Yeah.
That's not, most guys wouldn't even come into their mental field.
Yeah, but also I guess for women it's really difficult. Like I know personally, I'm slightly one of a kind because I'm definitely very clear in matters like this. Maybe because I've just been working on my communication constantly.
Yeah.
But it's like, I remember saying to my partner that I was like, when I felt most protected and held by you was when you asked me, when you closed the door so my older children couldn't come in so I could sleep. Like I heard you say to them, no, mum's having a sleep now. And you closed the door. I was like, wow, I've never felt more attracted to you. Thank you for closing the door and leaving.
Take the hint.
But it's like those pieces of like, and then afterwards telling him that like, I don't need these, this, and this from you. I just, what actually was the crux of everything was when you closed the door so I could have that extra
But
sleep.
that's what I'm talking about, translating everything from the mystical magic to literal. So we think protect, provide. I'm going to pay for you to eat. I'm going to pay your bills, or you're going to live with me and I'll take care of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it stops for the guy. The guy thinks, I've done that.
Yeah.
So what's she whinging about? Everything post that just sounds like nagging, because there's no clear, well, not say definition, but there's no, I guess,
clarity around.
There's no clarity because they're not saying to each other, let alone understanding, my wants, needs are this.
Yeah, and that brings it all the way back to if we were able to, I guess that's something too, because what I was going to say before is this underlying undertone of like these women's spaces, at least that I'm a part of and creating, with men's spaces, that it seems harder to curate and connect to, at least what I've watched and witnessed. There are definitely men's spaces that are happening, but it feels like, from what I've been wanting to create is like a family space, because then the men will be involved in a way, because they'll be there with their children, they'll be there with their partners, and obviously all the women have already sat in circles singing and dancing and all the things.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know where we, because obviously this is the thing, like there has to be these men's spaces. And like personally, we tried to do women's circles with kids and with little like 2-year-old, 3-year-old girls or kids, boys as well. But it's just like, you can't get to the depth that you're aiming for when you have these really little kids. And it always ended up being like, okay, it's about the children in this moment. And I know, and I've heard of family unit spaces, like where, the kids are just involved and they're just there. And I think that's really that's where we need to get back to,
Yeah.
because we are so focused on curating places for our children to be able to be comfortable. So we've got their toys with us, we've got their things, and this just came to me then, being at this camp out where I remember who we were with, who was hosting, was like, get rid of all the toys. Toys make trouble. And it was. She got rid of the toys, and then there was just singing, and we were weaving, and it was like the children were just with. And I think that's the vibration that we need to start bringing back, is that like the children are just involved and they're just
Children need to
with.
play.
Yeah.
We don't play as kids. We don't play as adults.
No.
So people don't also realize that when we go from, let's say, a child to the warrior to the king, that we transcend and include each level. It's like once you've hit the warrior, well, you can't play anymore. You've got to fight. And once you've hit the king phase or queen phase, well, you're not fighting anymore. You're doing whatever you're doing. And once you go into the wise man, wise woman phase, well, don't even think about fighting.
Yeah.
That's up to them.
Yeah.
But it's all a part of you.
Yeah.
So evolution, the word evolution means by definition to get bigger. So we, in our literal translation of that,
Put on heaps of weight.
well said, touche. We've translated that as, we're not evolving because we're not getting physically, literally bigger. But what it really means is our consciousness is expanding. So when our consciousness expands, we have the capacity to see what's going on, to hold space for people, to see, that person doing that once really annoyed me, but I used to do that as a kid as well. So I'm just being hypocritical now. So I'm really just angry at myself. That's what evolution means. But we cut that off a long time ago. And that comes back to that literal translation, which goes back to the Bible days. It's been going on essentially since then.
Yeah, right. And you're just saying that about how we transition and morphing from one to the next, but we have to we're actually encapsulating, we're adding to, broadening, lengthening, widening. And that sort of brings it all back to community and being a part of a community, because that is then you're being with the child that you were once. You're being with the warrior that you were once. You're being with the king or queen. You're being with the wise people above you. But you're being with the spectrum of yourself within the community.
Yeah.
And I think we can create that and be a part of that. And I feel like it would be really nice if those pieces, like these wise women and men, were really available.
I think they are available today. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been censored in recent times. But there's lots out there, so it's really just a matter of finding someone who you resonate with. Yeah,
and I guess the thing is, you can find someone online. I guess in this particular, ritualistic form, it's not like having a mentor you can find online for sure. But having a community-based, unless you're going to move to Hawaii to be with that guy that is the mentor that you've been craving. I mean, maybe, but it's all about the community and that piece of that, right?
But even if several people got together, collectively they can be the wise elder that you're seeking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it definitely, it's definitely available. Yeah, it just is really interesting what you said about how, the capacity expanding, because I definitely feel that personally with for me in this phase of my life, with each pregnancy, with each birth, the capacity has expanded more and more. And it's not that, people are like, how's being a mother of 3? I mean, I'm only just starting, but thus far it feels fantastic. Thus far I've had the community backing. Thus far I've felt so held, so seen in the phase that I'm in, and that's allowed me to feel soft. And in me feeling soft, vibration flows, frequency is on another level. So it definitely allows my capacity to feel bigger. Before, when I ran Moon Circle with my my 2-year-old, I was like stressed out of my brains because she was just talking the whole time. Whereas now when she's talking the whole time, I'm like, sweet. It's like I was annoyed at my own inner self for talking all the time. Like, fuck yeah, imagine that.
You're not the only one.
But yeah, and then slowly kind of, my capacity for that is so much bigger. And allowing that and allowing children to be children, but then also, like I'm hearing myself say this, is that allowing children to be children, but to be a part of spaces that are essentially king, queen, adult spaces where they can just be a part of it and they can feel excited by that. They don't need to be disconnected. They don't need to be on a device separate from. They are a part of. And we allow space for them to be a part of, to ask questions, to receive answers in the moment, in the community.
Yeah. Because I think it's weird. Like you and I are at a funny age. You're 30...
30-ish.
30-ish. I'm 40-ish. And... you know, we've been on this earth long enough that we think we know how it all works, this human life thing. But then you talk to someone who's 70, 80, maybe even 60, and they will, like, they could learn more in a week than we could in a year, as a metaphor. And how they translate it and asking them about what they see in the world and how we see the world, you'd get vastly different perspectives.
Yeah.
With that. Unfortunately, today, if one of those perspectives didn't fit a certain agenda or a norm, societal norm, one would be cast out. That's our culture.
Yeah.
But finding that tribe, that community, just of like-minded people.
Yeah. People that want the same thing and that are willing to, like, cut the neon lights and come back to what is, what we are essentially, energetic beings. Drops of stardust, as I was sharing yesterday, that have just, culminated together, vibrating together. And somehow we're vibrating in your earwaves.
Magic.
On that note.
Is there anything else there?
Just, I guess, the last one was just how to get people involved in getting more into the ritual. Obviously, find your tribe. Reach out if you're looking for a tribe. Reach out and we can make one or point you in the right direction to kindle together. But yeah, I think it's something to just be really, really mindful that it's essential.
Yeah, absolutely. Because nothing in nature happens in isolation. So it's time to party.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.